Welcome back to Derailed. My name is JJ Lahey. I'm here with Chris Jackamett, our great friend of the show. He has been on here before. Jake is on the road, and so Chris is going to do his best Jake impression and rein me in when I need to be reined in. All right. Thank you, Chris, for agreeing to hop in here. I know that draft talk is more of what excites you, but you're a Packer fan, and I appreciate you coming on here to talk about the Jaire situation. Quick disclaimer. So you may have noticed we are late. We're 15 minutes late getting started. That's because I screwed up my microphone and could not get it working right. So if I sound a little bit different, I promise I will get it working again next week. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So we have Chris, the casual N, in the chat here saying, terrible news. Take that cap savings and make a run at Hendrickson. Chris Jackamett.
Sure.
Chris the casual N. Terrible news, yes or no? Where are you on this being a good or bad thing for the Green Bay Packers? Releasing Jaire Alexander. To the surprise of not many, I was surprised. I fully acknowledge. I said the whole time I had no expectation that he was going to get released. So, shame on me. I was wrong on that one. It was true the whole time. They were moving on from him. Where are you on how this affects the Packers in a positive or negative way?
I guess I kind of go both ways, right? I mean, we're so used to playing without him, but when he's on the field, he's so valuable. And when you look at cornerback, it's not just, your two starters. It's your cornerback 3 and 4 on your depth chart that give you so many snaps and so much value. And even though he's only playing, 300, 500 snaps in a season, that's significant, So, you hate to see him go, but, you gotta move on. I pray, Kalen King or maybe, a free agent signing. I think Caleb Farley was a free agent. He was a first-round pick a couple of years ago, and there's a couple other older guys on there. Is Rasul Douglas signed yet? I don't know. We could reunite with him, or I don't know.
I think you are in a similar place to me, seemingly, of like, hey, this can work out, but you don't currently probably have enough pieces on the roster today to go forward with the season, which brings me to like my biggest beef with the move, which is that they seem to have not prepared for this in the slightest, despite the fact that they were intending to do this all along. The cornerback room on the roster is like razor thin. And sure, I guess in large part, it does boil down to what do you think of Nate Hobbs? There's a lot of people who really have a high opinion of Nate Hobbs, think that he's going to be, everything that we need. And I'm not there. And I'm curious, Chris, if you have had an opportunity to look at what Nate Hobbs has done in the past and like if you have an assessment of what you think of him as a player. Jake Schyvinck is a big believer that
he's a big
Nate Hobbs is a fantastic signing. And I certainly acknowledge that he has the potential, the athleticism he's got. He has played well on the boundary before. I was, mildly enthused about the idea of playing him in the slot back when I thought that we could have Jaire on one side, have probably Valentine on the other side, work Nixon in there somewhere. I liked the idea of Nate Hobbs in the slot. But I mean, like as of today, Nate Hobbs is clearly our CB1, which is just kind of, you have to really like him to feel good about that situation is all I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe you want to put Nixon as that CB1. I mean, I'd like to think that maybe the coaching staff just made that decision and said, hey, we can move on with them. Maybe they saw some things out of Michael Robinson or in Nate Hobbs. I mean, during that draft class with Eric Stokes, I hated the Eric Stokes pick. I actually had Nate Hobbs ahead of him, even though, Stokes was like consensus 40-something. And I think Hobbs was like consensus 100 or something like that. And he is kind of more of a downhill presence. I mean, we have so many cornerbacks, so, you know, maybe they just feel that we can make it work with one of those guys. I was kind of looking at the breakdown of defensive coverages for the Packers too, to be like, you know, what do we expect in terms of deployment? And from last season, you know, weeks 1 through 17, we were running cover 2 and cover 3, like almost 60% of our snaps. I guess that doesn't really mean we're going to rely heavily on our safeties more, but I also see that the fact that they brought in Nick Collins and Morgan Burnett on the coaching staff, and I think maybe they're trying to prep some of our depth at safety to sort of cover our shortfalls with our corners.
I think that's a great place to start talking is Javon Bullard. He's clearly the odd duck out in the safety room. Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams are the presumed starters and should be. And then, you know, if you're talking about Javon Bullard as like the full-time slot, you know, the nickel defender, which a lot of people, I think, have started to suspect that that's the way things are going to go, that suddenly makes a lot more sense. And I think it potentially could play to Bullard's strengths a little bit more. He does not seem to be the answer at strong safety or free safety. Seems like you have to be playing him in the box or working him in there as your nickel defender. And you know, if you move him over to the cornerback room, the depth at that point, you feel better about it. So, like right now, it's Nate Hobbs, Keyshawn Nixon, and Carrington Valentine as the only established commodities. Behind those guys, at cornerback, your next best options are 7th round rookie Micah Hobinson, 2nd round sophomore pick Kalen King, and Javon Bullard, who hasn't played cornerback for us. So, like with those 3 being your next 3 guys up, with that being your top 6, and we usually keep 6 guys between cornerback and nickel if you lump those together. And I would pencil Javon Bullard as like as of today, our starting nickel for sure. So you're probably looking at Hobbs and Valentine and Nixon and Bullard, those being the 4 guys who are ever out there. You're in a crappy situation if either Bullard can't play or if you get, you know, experience any injuries whatsoever. And, you know, maybe it's fine. Maybe it's fine. And we've seen Goody go out and address holes before. Rasul Douglas is obviously the first example that comes to your mind. But Corey Ballantyne was certainly a success story. I was annoyed that we did not retain Corey this offseason. I didn't really understand. Just like for the amount of money that he got paid, I felt like it was totally worth it to keep him in our cornerback room since we were already losing Eric Stokes. We have a pile of guys who are, you know, practice squad, bubble caliber, as far as we know, and might flash this summer. You got Jonathan Baldwin, Isaiah Dunn. I think we already moved on from Caleb Hayes, but we got Kamal Haddon, Tyron Herring. I think that's it. Maybe there's another guy we picked up in the last couple days, couple weeks. But you're hoping that you can find a diamond in the rough there. And I don't like how close that diamond in the rough is to getting playing time. I feel like we're like at least a whole 1 body short in that cornerback room. And I felt that way before we moved on from Jaire, just saying. So, you know, to Matthew Hansen's question here in the chat, how do we feel? I mean, in who do we trust? Sure. Yeah, Aaron in the chat, happy to see you on here. I did mention Kalen King. I would say I'm more excited about seeing Kalen King out there than Micah Robinson because he's a rookie. And then, like, we've seen Javon Bullard. It hasn't been great. I think I feel about equally hopeful and optimistic about Kalen King playing cornerback as I do Javon Bullard playing cornerback for us. I'd put those 2 guys on pretty even foot.
Right. They're both not even 23 yet. So I mean, they're the youngest guys we have in the room, I think. I don't know about the newest pickups in Micah Robinson, but I like to think that, with the new coaching staff, you're trying to get these, this freshman class of corners and safeties to just bring them up. I mean, even, Katano Ladapo and Zane Anderson, like in the limited snaps that they had, they looked pretty good out there. And like maybe you can run some more like some cover 3 and cover 4 and pepper in like an extra safety in there to, give yourself some different looks. And I still think I really expect that we'll get, one of these unsigned free agents that are out there. I think maybe he'll sign him on just for, added depth or a veteran presence. I mean, I mentioned Caleb Farley, Asante Samuel Jr. They both have been like underperforming on their respective teams, but just to have one other guy out there competing who is, had a selection process where they were highly rated, would make me feel a lot better. And I think when you see them let Jaire go and you look back at the draft class, you just I'm just like left wanting, to me, it wouldn't, like, Matthew Golden wasn't the highest guy on my board. It was like Will Johnson. And I keep thinking, like, why did Will Johnson tumble to, 47? And, we actually get to play the Cardinals this year. I live in Phoenix, and it'd be my next team. And they got to pick him up. And I feel like he might, maybe reap what you sow. I don't know the words that I'm looking for, but, get that experience of seeing the guy you passed on play against you and maybe shut you down a little bit. And the fact that, we also passed on, Amos in the second for Anthony Belton, got that third left tackle in there. Javon Ravel was up there, could have taken him too in your second pick. I don't know. It hurts a little bit when you, maybe they thought that they'd keep him. I mean, it seems like it's so close to the June 1st deadline that it was intentional all along. And I hate to think, but like if, our cornerback room looks just atrocious at the end of the season, like is Guterkut's going to be on the hot seat for, ruining our cornerback room? How's the new management going to feel about this? And policy.
Mark Murphy did speak on this today, and he seemed like fully in support of the move. Praised Jaire's ability and showed the appreciation for what he's done for us over the years, and like put it out there like he just has missed too much time and the injuries have just racked up too much to where like that was the decision, that was the reason why they moved on.
Yeah,
I think when you and I have listed just a ton of different inflection points along the road here where little frustrations here and there with the process that are all individually defensible. Okay, you liked Matthew Golden in the first round, so you took him. You really liked Anthony Belton in the second round, so you took him. You passed on this free agent for this reason. You passed on this free agent for this reason, sure. But the totality is that the situation we're in right now feels like you are just placing a ton of faith and trust in the coaching staff's ability to make this really not be an issue schematically, and really counting on Nate Habs probably overperforming what he has done in the past. Drew says, hey guys, I'm not happy about losing Jaire. This is incredibly stupid. Yeah, I mean, I'm not mad. I'm certainly not mad at moving on from Jaire. Certainly disappointed and sad because he was a player I really loved. Got a lot of great memories of his time here.
The quality of our post-game interviews is going down. What are we going to do without that?
We lost the Smith brothers. Now we lost Jaire. I think it'll be okay. But is it going to be great? I don't think it's going to be great, and I think we need great. Especially, coming into this season, the off-season focus clearly was, hey, let's fix the offense. And I agreed with that priority. Let's fix the offense. That was the number one priority I had as well. Fix up the offensive line. Figure out how to get some production from our uber-talented but mistake-prone wide receiver room and address the defensive line. And we didn't address the defensive line and then gutted the cornerback room. Losing, we lost Jaire and Stokes and Ballantyne. And then replaced those three guys with Nate Hobbs. I just don't think it's enough. Like, the corners last year were a concern heading into the season, and then it ended up not really being a disaster. And the defense was fine. It was improved over the previous year. It wasn't enough to carry the team when the offense was struggling, but it was fine. But we are very much trying to win a Super Bowl this year. And I think that we have massive questions on both the defensive line and the cornerback room. You don't want, those are the two biggest areas of concern on the entire defense. I would rather have problems at both safety and linebacker than I would at defensive line or cornerback. And we have questions at defensive line and cornerback. Add to that the fact that we don't know if the offense is fixed. We've thrown a lot of resources at the offense, but we have to see it. We have to see if it's going to work. Let's see if this new look offensive line fixes the problems we had last year. If we can keep Jordan upright, you got to see if either of these rookies we drafted at wide receiver are going to play, if they're going to contribute. We got to see if Wicks and Reed are going to take a step back from the problems that they were facing last year. And I think they will, but it's just a lot of assumptions. And I just don't like that this was the process for defensive line and cornerback, which was, let's not really add anything. That's just kind of how I feel about it, is that we just didn't add anything. At best, I think you could say, if Nate Hobbs plays fantastic, I think you're saying at best it's a lateral move from the trio of Jaire and Stokes and Ballantyne to Hobbs. At best, you can't tell me that the cornerback room got better this offseason. It's hard to make the case that it didn't get worse. This is just where I'm at, is that I'm just struggling to see the vision here with Goody of why this felt like it was good enough in the cornerback room. And I can be on board with moving Jaire. I can be on board with not drafting a cornerback. It's just the totality of all the decisions that got us to where we are. I just don't like where we are.
Yeah, and I kind of liked Micah Robinson too as a late round pick. And I think it was just, you go into that draft class and you realize that there's just not a lot of good cornerback picks, even, Will Johnson, Trey Amos, and I was a big fan of Darian Porter just because of his versatility. Siobhan Ramel, to me, outside of those four, you start talking about Noah Williams and Longer Beam later on. And I'm just these guys are not better than Kalen King in my mind. And I'm just
well, and Noel's a slot guy. We kind of have a lot of slot guys at this point, which is kind of a shift. Goody previously was allergic to bringing in anybody who plays slot, and now it kind of feels like we got to find a slot guy and make him a boundary guy, and then let the other slot guys fight it out for the slot.
Right. Yeah, it's a weird situation to be in. I actually kind of feel that way about some of our receivers too. He's spent a lot of draft pick capital taking slot receivers with, Jalen Reed and the guy before who we cut from Clemson, and I forget his name. Amari Rogers.
Amari Rogers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you spent a lot of draft capital on slot receivers, and it's like, and then you ended up having to catch back up with your outside guys. And I kind of feel like, maybe not having the foresight to plan ahead and take these guys, really hurts you. I think it also like kind of irritates me too, like during the draft, like with Will Johnson, knowing that they were so invested in Higgins as a wide receiver, like, and that Atlanta traded up to take Pierce as an edge, and the Giants came up to grab Dart. Like, you could have made a trade to get out. Like, I'm convinced they probably had that phone call and they were just so excited about Golden that they took it. But I feel like you just can't do that, as like that's kind of like the FOMO mentality that wrecks, NFL teams, and the teams who succeed the most in drafting and team building are the ones who are patient and sort of let it come to them. And that's like with the Ravens and with the Eagles. I see their roster building, and I'm just like, yeah, it's kind of obvious why you have such great teams, because you're just like, I'm fine just taking who comes to me, or trading back if I have to, or getting rid of Carson Wentz to get extra draft capital when you can. You look at what we could have gotten for Rodgers, where it would have been,
I'll take the rest of some package.
Devin Witherspoon. If you told me we had Charles Cross and Devin Witherspoon and we lost Rodgers for one season, like, I would be fucking through the moon about our chances to go to the Super Bowl this year. And now I'm questioning whether we're even going to have a chance at a wild card. Like, we already are going to be facing. We went from an easy schedule last year to one of the NFC North has the hardest schedules this year.
I didn't think we had a easy schedule last year. Are you just talking about like the preseason rankings of the schedules?
Yeah, it was strength of schedule, right? You're going against AFC South, and now we're going against the AFC North.
You look at the only teams we lost to last year. Mm-hmm. Like the Chicago Bears, notwithstanding, we lost to the Lions twice. They were fantastic. We lost to the Vikings twice. They were a buzzsaw. We lost to the Eagles twice. And then you got that doofy game against the Bears that, the Packers absolutely deserved to lose because they played like crap. Right. The team was falling apart at that point. But, and I don't know that this like drastically changes my perception of our win total for the season.
I mean, but
I'm concerned about like our playoff, once we get into the playoffs, our playoff survivability without like a buzzsaw defensive back room. Like, are we really thinking that our safeties are going to impact that much? That Xavier, McKinney, and Evan Williams are going to be like, that is the key to making it through the playoffs? Because you can't tell me Nate Hobbs and Keyshawn Nixon and Valentine are like a special cornerback room that's going to carry you. It can be good enough to where you're not panicking about every decent passing attack you come up against. But Jaire, you look at Jalen Ramsey or Xavier Howard, any of these cornerbacks over the last few years, like, they made a massive difference. The Giants have always had a fantastic pass defense. So, the Steelers never had to carry a lot of the way.
And I guess I was thinking, a lot of people were really optimistic about the NFC North teams. I mean, I've heard, people like, what if all four of us are above 500? And I'm kind of on the other side of it. I'm kind of a little more pessimistic, thinking, what if we're all below 500? Like, and, it's, 8 and 9 gets you into that wild card because, for whatever reason, and the Lions losing Ben Johnson and, the Bears gaining him, like, are your coaching changes going to, how quick are you going to see the effects of that? And, is JJ McCarthy going to be able to carry the Vikings? To me, and when you're playing against, the Ravens and the Steelers actually have a respectable team. I mean, you got Rodgers now. Just from the defensive side of things, like, I question our ability to succeed against any AFC North teams compared to last year, where it's like I felt like we were struggling against like the Jaguars, and like we're pat yourselves on the back for taking out the Titans, right? And it's like I don't. I mean,
in fairness, we didn't.
We had beat him with a second string quarterback, right? We got Malik Willis, right? And I don't know. It's hard to see. You just wish that you had taken somebody a little bit higher with your draft capital, like Darian Porter. And I still don't understand how they could be over the moon about Anthony Belton, because I just watch his film and I'm just like, I feel like this guy's punching. I mean, maybe they really see him as a guard, but the fact that, you could have had Jared Wilson with your, second round pick, who's like a premier center, and, then you could add Elgton Jenkins, and we get back to the offensive line discussion of where everyone's going to go. But it just makes you feel a little bit better with something like that, rather than, sinking a guy who's played left tackle his whole collegiate career, and when you got, 2 or 3 other guys who can play the position, and depth at cornerback is so shot. It hurts. And then our who are the other teams that we got this year other than AFC North and the NFC East? We got the Broncos and the Cardinals, I think. I thought that's who I saw. And I don't think those will be gimme games either. I mean, Broncos are on the up and up. I really love Bo Nix coming out. And the Cardinals, too. I mean, maybe if I was critical of the Cardinals, I'd be like their receiving depth is kind of awful. I mean, you have, Marvin Harrison Jr. and your tight end who looks nice, but like the rest of their, if I look at the six guys with like Dorsch and Wilson, I'm just like, I don't know about that. But when we're playing them, I mean, we can stop 1 or 2 guys. It's those teams who have, when you're playing the Vikings and you have to cover Jefferson and Jordan Addison, where you're like, what are you going to do in those situations when you have these mismatches and they just throw all over you?
Leave some space for fans to react the way they need to.
Mm-hmm.
I see Aaron saying, I'm much more upset with Jaire himself. The guy refused to acknowledge his worth was impacted by his availability. Like, okay, moving on from Jaire, like, it's still fresh and painful right now. A lot of us are kind of grieving where it is and reeling to an extent about, like, hey, what is next? The Packers clearly are not stressed at all about it. They've been wrong before. I'm not saying that the fact that they are not stressed is, like, proof that it's going to be great. But I would just urge everybody, when you see other fans out there on social media reacting in the ways that they need to react, give them some freedom and space to be able to do that. Because I think it's good, fan how you need to fan. We're also trying to figure out, what do we think the path forward is going to be? Aaron said this feels like our wide receiver situation last year. A lot of assuming that 1 or 2 of these guys is going to make a huge step. I understand that. I could see that. I think maybe the comparison to me would be a little bit more like the 2023 wide receiver situation of, like, in 2024, we kind of thought we knew what we had in those guys, and we're looking for them to either repeat or take another step forward. And in 2023, it was like, okay, haven't really seen any of these guys do it per se, but maybe they're good enough. And then in 2023, they kind of were.
That was when we just had Watson and Doubs, right? And we got Wicks.
No, that was Wicks and Reed were rookies. They were rookies. Yeah. And don't forget,
didn't know what you had out of them.
Don't forget the second coming of Donald Driver. We had the one and only legendary Samori Toure on the roster as well. Aaron says, I guess I'm just not too worried. I don't love losing Jaire, but are we even losing him? He was rarely on the field, and our defense was much improved last year. Yeah, I mean, Jeff Hafley certainly called the defenses differently when he wasn't out there. So just having some clarity about your roster situation is a big deal,
Mhm.
and it allows you to prepare better. So I think that in and of itself is that's addition by subtraction, not in from the standpoint of like saying that Jaire was a detriment to the team, but the uncertainty of not knowing if he was going to be able to play each week was a detriment to the team. SDN 40 said the Lions took a hit on the O line and coaching staff. June predictions should be left to Bears fans. Now there is some wisdom right there. June predictions should be left to Bears fans. I agree with that. And I've been talking to some of my Lions fans here in Michigan where I live, and they're all kind of like doom and gloom about the Lions season, and I kind of want to be there with them, but I have PTSD from the fact that the Lions lost all of their defensive players last year, and it didn't make a difference at all. Like it should have impacted them so much, and it just didn't. So I know Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson are gone, and Frank Ragnow is gone. And I intellectually, as a NFL analyst, know that should have a massive impact, but I think I just need to see them suck before I believe they're going to suck. Okay. Drew said, well, we've also gotten bopped to the playoffs every year. And I would say, I think our defensive line is often to blame for that. Our defensive line and our offensive line, this is where you win playoff games, is in the trenches. And I think that in the last several years, neither of our trenches have been remotely good enough. And you can win a wild card game, but as you get deeper in to the point where there's kind of only the really good good teams left who are going to bully you up front, that's when we have had issues. And so I have taken a lot of umbrage at Goody's refusal to address the defensive line.
Hey,
I finally feel like he has taken enough swings at the offensive line that I'm like pleased with the progress that we have made this offseason on the offensive line. I think going from Josh Myers to Elgton Jenkins, that's certainly an upgrade. And then throwing anybody else in there over Sean Ryan, or the Sean Ryan, Jordan Morgan rotation that we had last year, is an upgrade. Whether that's going to be Anthony Belton, whether that's going to be year 2 of Jordan Morgan, there's options there. I think the offensive line is going to be significantly better. And you got Aaron Banks in the mix. I think this is going to be a big step in the right direction on the offensive line. Even if it's not great, last year was awful. And if we can just take a step forward from awful, I'll feel better about the offensive line. The defensive line still worries me a ton. And that is, I think, where most of my angst about the cornerback situation is coming from, is that I don't have any faith in our defensive line. And if we are not able to cover on the back end to make up for our defensive line issues, that's just got me terrified. Because the defense really was not a problem last year. There are a lot of people out there who think that it was. I don't think it was. But if you, whether you liked the defense last year or didn't like it, we have certainly subtracted more from last year's defense than we added. Our only real additions are like maybe you're going to get something out of Barryn Sorrell, or maybe you're going to get something out of Colin Oliver, and maybe Nate Hobbs is an upgrade over the Valentine rotation that we had last year. Other than that, you can't tell me that we are taking a step forward on defense other than seeing some of the young guys have a big second-year leap. I'm mainly talking Evan Williams and Edgerrin Cooper. So I have concerns on defense, and particularly I have concerns on the trenches for both sides of them.
And when you look at those Super Bowl, like the teams making it to the Super Bowl, they all have like that difference maker on the interior of the defensive line. I mean, like, Chris Jones or
Aaron Donald.
Yeah, Aaron Donald, like,
or any number of a half dozen guys on the Eagles roster.
Right. They have a rotational depth of impactful players because you can collapse the pocket and you can put pressure on them that way, so your cornerbacks aren't stressed.
That's why I'm so jealous of like the Eagles and Lions drafting. Like they keep attacking defensive tackle, and I'm like, Goody, look at that. You see what they're doing? See how they're actually adding guys to the interior defensive line? Like, thanks for getting Devontae Wyatt. Love Devontae Wyatt. Can we have anybody else in there at all besides Devontae Wyatt?
It's weird because whenever I do like the roster analysis across the league, it's like interior defensive lineman is like one of the most in-demand spots because it's just underperforming across the board.
And we have one good guy. Devontae Wyatt is our only good defensive tackle.
And Kenny Clark is falling off. Maybe you can get something out of Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse, undrafted.
But we're basically talking like priority undrafted free agents at this point, though.
Right. To me, like Stackhouse is your replacement for Slayton, and Brinson had high RAS score, looked all right with Texas, and I could see him or Sorrell kind of stepping up to like give us, or even Colin Oliver giving us that extra oomph off the edge to help our interior guys. Maybe you can, have Van Ness be rotating as a defensive end, and have some lighter blitzing packages with your Sam or Will. I don't know. I still, it's hard for me to, like, when I look at the teams and trying to get to the playoffs, like, I feel like we're constantly in this position where we're going for wild cards. And it's hard in the NFC North because, the Lions were good last year with the Vikings. So it's like we had 3 really good teams, and you really need to win the North so you can be in that discussion for that 1 or 2 seed, so you can get those advantages, a home game or a bye week. And, it's not enough to just make it into the playoffs. You have to, get over to the hump to give yourself that next advantage. Otherwise you're, playing the Eagles and having to, win one more game. It's a risk, you're playing against the best teams in the league at that point.
A lot of people in the chat are talking about the linebackers. So I'm just going to lump it all together as one big question, which is how can an improved linebacker room help our defense out this year, specifically cover up for the tremendous lack of options along the defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, you look at coverage-wise, I don't think our linebackers did that great other than Cooper. But
Colin Oliver, if we play him at linebacker at all, he was pretty darn good in coverage in college. I would really like to see him playing Sam linebacker. That would make me happy.
And with Nick Collins and Morgan Burnett, like, I think we have the expertise on the coaching staff to help those guys all take a step. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who else. I don't know who else I'd be really looking forward to seeing on this. I guess I was kind of a fan of Isaiah McDuffie. The Tyrone Hopper being there, I still don't understand. I never understood Tyrone Hopper. That selection was wild. I mean, I don't even.
Brown is just really rich for a pure special teamer. That's all I'm going to say. Oh, speaking of third round, there was a question earlier on about Savion Williams and about taking somebody else over him. Where'd it go?
After Savion Williams, you had Wyatt Milam, right? You had Jared Wilson, Charles Grant, who's okay. I wasn't a big fan of him, but between Charles.
Who said, would you rather had Hairston over Golden, Amos over Belton, or Ransaw over Williams? I'm going to go an easy Ransaw over Williams because I Because of the three, the first guys that we took, like Savion is he's the obvious, odd man out of like, sure, sky high potential, but also like a well over 50% chance that he just doesn't pan out at all and can't play ball. So that's just the obvious, easy answer. And like, again, my problem with Savion Williams is not that he's on our roster. It's that we had to give him a third round pick to go get him. And there were still plenty of guys available in the third round who I think were far more valuable as draft prospects.
Yeah, I actually thought Savion was going to drop a lot farther. He was one of him and Golden were the only picks that we had that were above consensus value. And I was like, Savion, I felt like he was overhyped through the whole process. And I was like, yeah, he looks good for a gadget player, but if he can't be a wide receiver, like you should.
Well, this has been the big debate between me and Jake on this channel. Because he is on the side of Savion as a gadget player who can't really play wide receiver. I mean, I'm not trying to speak for him. All right, Jake, if you're listening, and
that's what he is. That's what he is as of now, as a commodity. That's what he is. But It's not that he can't play wide receiver. It's just that we don't know if he can be an efficient one.
Yeah.
So it's that big unknown, right? You're like, is he going to be able to pick that up, or is he just going to be, what he's been through college?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the concern. And through the process, the Mel Kipers of the world we're all championing Savion Williams, but I'm like, when you talk about some of the other guys who went later, like Torrey Horton, like how can you hate on Torrey Horton, who does like a little bit of everything and does it well, and or like Ayo Manor even, who put on a clinic against Travis Hunter. Like, how do you hate on a guy like that? Or Jalen Royals went after him, and like. I'm like, all three of these guys I would have taken over Savion, but not in the third. And in the third, that's where I was hoping we'd get, a Jared Wilson or a Wyatt Milam or Jalen Travis as a tackle who I think had a little more versatility, or even Ozzie Trapillo, who oddly enough got overdrafted as well in the second. Like, he was consensus 95 or something. And I was like, he could have been on our target for a third round pick. And I also really like Jack Besh, so I was really hoping they'd end up with him, even though all signs pointed to Golden and Higgins. I felt like if Golden got picked before, I think a lot of people thought Hairston was going to be the pick for the Packers, and I think if Golden had gotten picked before, I think we might have gone with Higgins, because I think they were determined to get their wide receiver. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, they're going to play him in wide receiver packages, but, the way, we like to use our wide receivers, we like to run a lot of sweeps and screens with them, and that's exactly what I expect them to do for Williams.
My concern with Savion is I don't want them using him in all these gadget roles. Like, I understand the desire to get the ball in his hands and give him some confidence. I just want to coach him up to just be a pure wide receiver. In college, we saw him do absolutely everything that you need to see him do, and do it well, just not at the same time. It was like whack-a-mole. It's like, hey, here's a stretch where I'm a great route runner and I'm precise. Here's a stretch where my release is great and I can create separation. Here's a stretch where I'm making athletic catches, high pointing it. I don't have any interest in a gadget player. Chris says, is a gadget player worth a third round pick? I don't have any interest in a gadget player. There are no good gadget players. Like that's not a bonus in the NFL. There are offenses where you take a great player like Tyreek Hill and go run some gadget plays with him because he is great. But a gadget player, I don't think has any use in the NFL right now.
I feel like the only guy who ever comes to mind when I think about that is Taysom Hill, right? The tight end quarterback, wide receiver.
Or Cordero Patterson. You think of these names because they're the one exception out of 300 guys that were tried along this route who you got some production out of.
You have to think that if they're taking him in the third, that they intend to develop him into a wide receiver. Like that's the intention, to not just use him for,
Which is why I don't like hearing
something.
Adam Stenovich talk about, we're going to get so creative, the calls that we play, or the plays we call for him.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, how about you be a coach and teach him how to play wide receiver? How about that? Can we start with that, please?
Mm-hmm. And if he, snap at center, whenever you need a different center, right? If Jenkins goes down, he's our number 2, I think. Slide him in there.
Speaking of center, Drew asked if the Packers could get a stud center in the 2026 NFL draft, do you think they would take a center and move Jenkins back to guard, maybe even right guard? I will just say, of the 5 offensive line positions, right guard is probably the place I want Elgton Jenkins the least. After that, be right tackle. I really like him along the left side of the offensive line or the center.
He's playing great at left guard.
He's great at left guard. He was great at left tackle. I think he'll be great at center. I would guess he probably spends the rest of his career as center. Just my guess. We'll have to see how this season goes, but that would be my prediction, is that he spends the rest of his career at center. If we were going to move him, I would probably be pretty happy to move him to left tackle. There's a lot of talk about, are the Packers actually going to pay Rasheed Walker and bring him back? And the consensus answer is no, they're not going to. But they're just not going to be able to swing that kind of cash at Rasheed Walker, especially looking at the guys they've drafted and brought in. That they want Jordan Morgan to be a left tackle. They want Anthony Belton to play one of the 2 tackle spots, and they have Zach Tom. So if we're going to move Elgton Jenkins at some point, I would prefer to move him to left tackle. SDN says, I think the Packers intended to move on from Jenkins next year. He's trying to block that. Interesting theory. I guess I don't see those pieces, but I'm interested in hearing more about your theory for sure. Toolfist also says, I'm sure seeing Jaire's injuries made them hesitant to draft the corners in this class, most of whom has had significant injury histories. That's valid. That's a valid thought.
Will Johnson, I think, stubbed his toe. I don't know what happened. Something with his foot.
He got NFL draftitis.
I think Revel had the ACL, was it? And then Amos had some back issues, and then I forget the other corner out of Michigan who had like a hip injury, something like that. That's probably the, or maybe it wasn't Michigan, but he was a top 50 player, and he wasn't on my board. But yeah, he had some hip injury, and I'm like, you got to turn your hips this corner. Like, how are you going to come back from that? Is it going to be the same? I don't know. That was also Will Johnson, was it? Yeah, and then Darian Porter was the only one who I don't think had any injuries. I thought it was somebody else. Yeah, I was going to say the only center that I've been looking forward to in next year's draft is the center out of Florida, Slaughter. I think is
Slaughter's the real deal.
Yeah,
he's so much fun.
And he's got a really good build too. Like he looks perfect for the role.
So SDN says Jenkins is due $25 million next year at age 31.
Or I was thinking about Benjamin Morrison.
Oh yeah, well he was from Notre Dame, wasn't he? Or am I crazy?
Yeah, that's right. He was Notre Dame.
Yeah. Notre Dame fans would be pretty ticked that you got Notre Dame and Michigan. All right, we have 2 questions I want to hit from Too Old for This. Tyler Dershall, are you in the chat here? I wish Brian Moffy was in the chat here. That snake. Skip it out again. Okay, so tool for this says, what flavor is that? Is that pink lemonade? I can't show you the logo on here because it's redacted because we don't air the name or the logo of this company because they don't sponsor us yet. Someday they will. And then we'll talk about how delicious they taste and where you can buy them and how cheap they are. But this is the sour pink lemonade flavor of my redacted energy. And speaking of redacted energy, so me and Tool for this and Tyler Dershel, Chris, don't say that word. We can't say that word. We are starting our own company, as you know, Redacted Energy. Here we go, Redacted Energy. So,
I like it.
So Tool for this drew this up for us. This is Redacted Energy, Derail Your Exhaustion. I'm excited to announce we have some new freaking flavors. These are football inspired. They are delicious. We're going to start with my favorite, Cheese and Packers.
Oh, God.
We also have, and this one is sponsored by Tool for this. We have a Minnesota Vikings flavor, empty trophy case. We also have Chicago Bears flavor, the 1980s called. And
Bears.
Last but not least, bringing up the rear, Detroit Lions flavor, Crying Lions.
Crying Lions. It's probably my favorite.
Warning choking hazard, contains kneecaps. Coming to a store near you. I promise that the Cheese and Packers one is not cheese flavored. It is Vince Lombardi flavored.
That sounds much better.
Drew says Redacted Energy is legitimately amazing branding. Yeah, thank you, Tool, for this.
I like it. I was thinking
Chris
maybe
says,
like a brandy old fashioned flavored, you know? Like that'd be an okay energy drink.
That is exactly what the Cheese and Packers flavor is. There you go. You can see in all its glory. Cheese and Packers flavored Redacted Energy. Derail your exhaustion. Chris, the casual end says pink lemonade, tasty confirmed. Yeah, this flavor of this beverage company that shall not be named because they don't pay us any sponsorship money. Why is my camera doing this? It's so stupid. Sour pink lemonade. It is. It's one of the more refreshing ones, and I've been way behind on sleep lately, so I really need this to get me through. So, Redacted Energy out there. So just a taste of what you could get if you're paying us just a little bit of sponsorship money. You'd have this great commercial, but with your actual name in there. So, all right, and then now we're gonna get to the football question from Tool for this. I'm curious if they plan to use up the cap space on a player. Cough, cough, Hendrickson. Cough, cough, TJ Watt. Chris, I'm gonna let you answer this first because I took the last couple first.
I absolutely think that they're going to sign somebody. I think if I look at the average cap space that we go into the season playing with, I mean, 30 million seems pretty high, and I feel like usually we're hovering around like 10 to 15. So when I look at, Spot Track to look at available free agents, I'm like, who's about, 10 million that I would be thinking that would be who they would be going for. I don't know. Edge player, I have to think that they're going to go for cornerbacks, but filter on edge. I'm like, maybe not those guys.
I'm leaning they don't bring anybody in. I'm leaning, maybe there's a $5 to $8 or $9 million pickup at some point here, but we just have a bunch of guys with extensions coming up, and I think the Packers would
You think they're just
I mean,
going
like,
to use it to get ahead of it so they can get ahead of the cap for their next run?
I think that's what you got coming. I mean, you got Zach Tom alone is going to be tremendously pricey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You got Devontae Wyatt at the exact same time.
Yeah, they had a lot of picks from that recent draft.
Yeah, 2022 and 2023 classes, I think were really, really incredible. And there's a price that comes with retaining that. So next year, the Packers have to pay Quay Walker. They have to make a decision on Christian Watson. The two guys we already talked about. That doesn't make sense. Why would Anthony Belt do this on there? So, and then you have a Romeo Doubs decision to make, and they're probably moving on from him. But also, like today, sitting where we are, you have no idea which wide receivers at the end of the season you're going to be feeling like our priorities to keep around and pay. You also have Kingsley and Agbari, and he's not going to break the bank. But if you want to keep him around, and I think you should,
Mm-hmm.
he's probably going to get. I would think he's probably going to get in the range of at least 10 mil. Maybe they don't keep him. Maybe they don't. It does seem like the Packers do not like Kingsley as much as I do. But Zach Tom is clearly going to be the really big line item there. And then the Rasheed Walker question. Maybe the Packers look at this and say, hey, now we're in a situation where we have the type of money that allows you to keep Rasheed Walker. And he is certainly in the top half of starting left tackles in the NFL. Jake and I did this, 2 weeks ago? We were looking at the top 16 left tackles in the NFL, and it was not hard at all to figure out where Rasheed Walker fit in there. He wasn't in the top 10, but he was in the top 16. And it was pretty undeniable. Aaron says, how likely is Jalen Ramsey? I keep forgetting Jalen Ramsey's still in the league because he needs to hang it up.
Yeah, Jadeveon Clowney's around still.
You get Peyton Manning?
Hey, Manning, bring him back.
Yeah, he was a good player. He won a Super Bowl.
That's what I heard.
Aaron says, honestly, spend it all in the trenches. Thank you. Hey, Brian Gudikins, take a leaf out of Aaron's book. SDN says Quay Walker. I think it's that comment has been in there for a minute. Sorry for not reading it when you first put it in there. Drew says Preston and Za'Darius are both available. That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, Preston's doesn't have a lot left in the tank. And he was pretty darn bad with the Steelers after he moved on from us. And then Za'Darius is crazy. Za'Darius needs to go play with the Bears so he can complete the quadruple crown. He also needs to
the entire NFC North.
He's been with the AFC North too. So he's only three teams away from having the entire North. He just needs to go to the Steelers, Bengals, and Bears. So figure out which one of those three teams he can go to this year and see if he can get 2 more years out of his career. Chris says they shouldn't pay Quay, but Goody will, no doubt. I want to keep Quay. I didn't want to keep him for the 5th-year option amount, but I would rather keep him than not keep him. And I think that we can keep him. I think he's not going to price himself out of our availability with other teams. There's not other teams who are going to be salivating over him. Chris says I would not pay 55. Is that Kingsley? Is Kingsley 55, or are you saying 55 million for somebody? Sign Kendall Fuller. There you go. Drew said, I'm not saying we should sign them, just saying we dropped them at the right time. Oh, yeah. The Smith brothers. Yeah, no doubt. Well, I will disagree, though. We should have moved on from Z a year before we did. I was so ticked that we brought Z back. I was so mad. And then that was a horrible decision. SDN says if Ramsey gets cut, the Packers like generational players such as Peppers and Woodson. I could see them kick the tires on that. I wouldn't say Ramsey is generational, but he's certainly for the right price. They'd bring him in for sure. I mean, you even just look at some of the former first round busts that they have, brought in for a few weeks. I mean, like right now in the building, we have Isaiah. I think is the guy's name, number 8 overall from 2020, the linebacker from Arizona.
Isaiah Simmons.
Isaiah Simmons, and then we also brought in Jalen Smith, and we brought in that cornerback from the Raiders who was here for like 2 minutes. Maybe it was a safety. He was a safety. It was a second round safety from 2019. I can't remember what his name was. And he was here for 5 minutes, and then they cut him. Aaron says, was Asante Samuel Jr. bad? Why is he not signed anywhere? I mean, he was kind of a little bit of a flash in the pan as a rookie and kind of downhill a little bit after that. I mean, he has moments, but
he just hasn't picked up. Yeah, he hasn't been that solid cornerback for the Chargers.
Yeah, he certainly has struggled.
I feel like Samuel or Farley, like I feel like you could get those guys on like a low cost and just have like, a dice roll on a guy who might be able to turn it around with a different coaching staff. I mean, I hate to bet on a name like Asante Samuel, but I kind of liked Caleb Farley. I think Carolina or forget who. Your audio's cutting in.
Eagles. Drew says Jimmy Graham and I can't read that. It's censored. I don't know. Poop emoji or 2 others we tried. I don't know who. I have no idea what the other name is.
I don't know that name. It sounds unfamiliar.
Adam says Ramsey is now a safety in Green Bay. Bay has plenty of those. Fair. I'm not opposed to bringing in Ramsey. I don't have the same like star power awe Ramsey that.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you're playing, 80% of your snaps are zone, which is kind of like what the Packers tend towards. Like, it's much easier to put safeties in those sort of cornerback roles than it is to get it, try to make them play true man. I should bring up that the defensive coverages from all of last year. What is it?
Yeah. You have that?
Yeah, let me. Where do I put it in here?
Okay. To grab, we're about to wrap up, but this is definitely worth hitting before we wrap up.
Sure.
And I apologize that we're only going for an hour today. Drew said Mercedes Lewis was another stud tight end we tried. That chat that message is just there's a lot going on there. So Mercedes Lewis, I didn't feel like he was like a big name before we brought him in, and I feel like he dramatically improved his career reputation with his time with us. I thought he ended up being just a fantastic addition. Certainly not trying to argue with you. I think you and I are kind of on the same page here. But he was, to your point, he's like the one example that you can point to of highly regarded, highly drafted guy who we brought in, and then it was just it worked right away. Lewis was the first round. Who's Lewis? I'm drawing a blank. Lewis? Oh, Mercedes Lewis. Idiot. Okay, here, I got the image that you sent me.
Yeah.
Whoop. Hold on. There we go. Sorry about that. I was trying to make it more visible. All right, defensive coverages during the 2024 NFL season. So we got the Packers number 3rd by EPA per drop. Play cover 0, 2% of the time, which is pretty low. Man cover 1, 16% of the time, about average. Cover 2 man, not at all. Interesting, 0% of the snaps. Mostly played cover 2 zone, 25%. That is kind of shocking to me that you'd be cover 2 zone 25% of the time, and you'd run cover 2 man 0% of the time from those looks. That seems improbable. What do you think about that?
I couldn't. I was trying to pull the data set using R, and they use NFL Fast R.
Yeah.
But they have their own data set that covers every play in the NFL over a season where you can sort it. And it's, I mean, it seemed accurate. I mean, I don't know who puts in the data, but.
I mean, like league wide, cover 2 man, not a lot of people ran a ton of it. You had the Jaguars at 7% leading the league. You got a lot of 1% and 2% here. But it's just shocking to me that we almost led the league. Looks like we tied for second place in cover 2 zone, 25%, and just 0% ran a cover 2 man look out of that, or ran cover 2 man out of that look. Cover 3, 33% of the time. Would you expect that to go up or down this year? Now that our cornerback room is I would say markedly thinner than it was last year, just with Jaire and Valentine not being there, and you're hoping to maybe work Javon Bullard in there more.
Mm-hmm.
You think cover 3 zone goes up or down this year?
I mean, the trend across the league is cover 3s going up, but
Buccaneers led the league at 48%. You got the Panthers at 41%. That makes sense.
But I look at like the teams who go to, the teams in the Super Bowl with like the Chiefs and the Eagles, and you're like, they're just running more man coverage schemes. And I'm like, I wonder if that's just because, it speaks to like talent, their talent pools and their ability to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are certainly running man more frequently than other teams are. They're still playing it less often than they do zone. The Eagles, a little bit higher in cover 1 than some other teams, but not outrageously higher. They did lead the league in cover 6 zone. I mean, they had a bajillion fantastic DBs on that roster, so that's not too surprising.
Maybe a little surprising seeing the Lions up there, 37% man cover.
There's 0 good cornerbacks. Yeah. I mean, they got two good safeties, no good corners, and they're playing much. Yeah. Cover 1, Lions lead the league. Crazy. Drew says, I think we're built to be a cover 3 team. STN40 says, just to push the theory, look at the Dolphins snaps, Ramsey incoming. Well, hey, I mean, the situation that our DB room is in right now, absolutely, I think throwing Jalen Ramsey into the mix would improve that room. No question about it. So I'm for it. If we're not overpaying, I'm absolutely for it. And I would say maybe with where we're at with cap space and corners, and I know that, we already had the conversation about is he a safety or is he a corner today? I think you could still play him at corner. I think you could certainly make the case that we could afford to pay him more than a lot of other teams could. He's worth more to us than he would be to some teams. So I would certainly be on board with the theory that overpaying for some teams versus overpaying for us might not be the same. Chris, we're about to wrap up and get out of here. Any final thoughts from you regarding anything we talked about, or thoughts about how you see the season going?
I think we are BJ Raji days away from the first regular season game. So go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go. Everybody, make sure you go check out Chris. He's at Extrapolated on Twitter. Chris, I thank you so much for agreeing to come on here. Really appreciate you. Want to have you again on here. You know, as you told me, draft is your thing, and so I'll
once we get
definitely
more into the season, some prospects get some play, I think we can have another conversation. Good policy.
love to have you back on here as a regular contributor, because always enjoy hearing your input and thoughts and seeing your cool projects that you're working on, because you always got great projects.
Mm-hmm.
In the words of the late, great Mr. Ed Policy, Chris, you heathen, get your hand over your heart. Thank you all so much for listening. Go